welcome to the web. This video is very interesting. Hope y'all enjoy it. I found it to be enlightening. Enjoy. Welcome to the web. This video is not a video that's made by the web. The source is in the description as usual.
Like, I think they knew, but like maybe they didn't really know. Sometimes you can hate somebody so much that you will hate someone in spite of someone to your own hurt. And after the Brown versus Board of Education decision, white people showed us that side. Rather than desegregate schools, a lot of people said we will just shut all the schools down. Even if that means white children don't get educated, we do not care. That's exactly what happened. And we're going to talk about Virginia and Arkansas. So a lot of people are familiar with, Little Rock Central High School in Little Rock, Arkansas. This is the famous case where, again, Brown versus Board of Education, you got to desegregate. So black and white children got to go to school together. And so the Little Rock Nine, as they're known as, these children endured so much abuse, so much just as a parent that had to be very difficult. And I'm certainly many black parents who put their children in those situations, they were thinking, as bad as this is about the future. This is about something higher. And so it was that kind of thing. So they try to send the kids there. The governor of Arkansas, though, Governor Faubus says, nah. And so he uses the state troopers to block these kids from going. Well, the president, Eisenhower, gets involved. And so he uses the National Guard to actually protect these students to go to school. Now, again, once they get in there, it's not a fantasy. Like, there are a lot of things that happen, and you can look up some of those interviews, go to YouTube or whatever. But that's what happens. Now, they were not going to take that lying down, though. Not at all. So what happens is that's the 1957-1958 school year. They say, OK, we got something for you. We're just going to shut it down for next year. And what happens is a series of things, right? So the Little Rock School Board, they requested a delay from the federal courts until January of 1961. Like, yo, we need a little more time. Yeah, we just need some more time. And the NAACP immediately petitions the U.S. Supreme Court, like, no, we need an emergency order to overturn that, because the federal court said, yeah, you all can have some more time, wink, wink. And so, again, we end up back in the Supreme Court. And so in the meantime, Governor Faubus, he's trying to run all the plays. He's running for re-election. He's pretty much got it on lock, but he calls for a special session of the State General Assembly. This is in August of 1958. And they pass a series of bills to try to fight this desegregation. And two of those bills in particular, one was to close any school that was threatened with racial integration. So if the school was going to integrate, let's just close it. And then this other bill allows state money to follow any student that's affected. So if this student wants to go to another public school or private school, we'll pay for it. Right. So this is a sort of forerunner of the charter school movement. So the U.S. Supreme Court meets in a special session September 1958. It's like, no. You got to integrate Little Rock High School, Little Rock Central High. You got to do this on September 12th. And Little Rock has to continue with their desegregation plan. That same day, the governor signs into law all them bills, and they close all 4 high schools in Little Rock starting Monday, September 15th. About 4,000 students immediately are affected. Now, interestingly enough, 177 teachers and administrators, they have to keep going with their contract. They have to show up to an empty building. Like, they actually have to do this. The other crazy thing is, and this is totally off the topic and random, the governor is like, OK, no schools, but keep playing football. Like, the governor actually orders them to keep playing football for the 1958-1959 school year. This is how much we value education in this country. Yay, USA. So there are over 2,900 white students that get displaced. 2,900 white students do not have a school all of a sudden. 35% of those go to other public schools, right, in the state. Now, private schools in Little Rock take about 44% of those students. Incidentally, particularly in the South, if you see a private school, particularly like a Christian school, check the date when it was founded. It's probably right after the Brown versus Board of Education decision, probably in the late 50s, early 60s. Just, the Christians, they just all of a sudden felt called to education in that moment. Okay. Now, black students, right? What happens with them is a little bit different because, again, about 93% of white students find some other type of schooling. So for the most part, white people make it out. There's about 750 black students who are displaced. 37% of those, they find a public school somewhere in Arkansas, so they have to go live with a family member somewhere else or whatever, right? But about 50% of them have no kind of school. They have nothing. In Virginia, they, from 1956 to 1959, they have their massive resistance. Again, they're like, we are not going. We are not doing this. So rather than integrate, we're just going to figure something else out. Prince Edward County is a famous case in Virginia. Prince Edward County is one of the counties in Virginia. And they just said, look, we'll just close all the schools down. And one of the things that they do, they use this tactic to evade the law, which is basically they refuse to appropriate tax money to pay for the school year. We're just not going to do it. And so that sort of creates this foundation, again, for private education. They also offer tuition grants for white students to go attend other schools and private schools. No such thing done for black students. Lawmakers also made it optional to attend school and again, they offered white parents tuition support for private schools. And to make sure that, everyone stayed in line, the lawmakers in Virginia threatened to strip them of state funding if they integrated. Like the courts are saying you got to integrate, but we are going to take your funding if you do that. That's how much they did not want to do this. So from 1959 to 1964, black students in Prince Edward County, Virginia, received no formal education. Now, here's what's crazy, though. In Norfolk, Virginia, these 17 black students were somehow admitted to a white school. And they said, forget this, we're just going to close the school down. They closed all these white schools to make sure no black students got in. In the meantime, 10,000 white students are out of school in Norfolk. But the black schools stay open. Like, they hated them so much. We would rather your kids start getting educated and ours be uneducated. And black people were really confused, like, what just happened? Now, those 17 black students, now they're out of school now because they closed their school. Well, in the last months of 1958, what happens is they start attending classes in the basement of a local black church because, again, the white schools were closed that they were assigned to. The pastor, teachers, and other people in the community, they volunteer to teach them until there's this wealthy black person who steps up to finance an impromptu school. And you wonder, looking back, should that have been the play all along? So we talked in episode 1 about how black folks in Louisiana use separate but equal to their advantage. They said, okay, if you don't want to sit by me, that's cool. We're going to use state funding to build a school. And so they built a law school at Southern University, and it still stands today. Conversely, in Oklahoma, the offer was to build a law school at Langston, which is an HBCU. Now, of course, this law school was nowhere near equal, right? But the argument was, well, maybe we fight in court to make it equal versus fighting in court for integration, which is what happened. And the law school at Langston was shut down. So you look at this and say, is there maybe a strategy here? Well, what was the response of the NAACP, right? Roy Wilkins, who is the head of the NAACP, he says at this time, he basically said, you know what, opening private high schools for displaced students, that would defeat the whole intent to gain equal access for all students to public education. Okay, I mean, it's an answer, right? But looking back, you wonder, was there an opportunity to create black institutions? No, I'm not saying that would have been easy, right? And certainly the states were not going to help them fund that. Now, some states maybe more than others. This would have been a fight. But if you hate me that much that you would have rather shut the schools down and your kids not get educated, is that the environment I want my children in? Is that good for their health long term? And long term, if we're on this movement to fund private schools and fund children going other places, if the courts have shown that they're willing to say we have to provide equal education, could that have been leveraged in a fight to say, okay, we tried, they didn't want to, so why don't you fund equal education over here? We'll just start some schools. And maybe those schools still exist today. Maybe we find creative ways to advocate for funding so that we're not putting our children in harm's way and we're building stable, vibrant black institutions to provide for the education of black children. Now, again, I'm not saying any of this is easy or would have been a magical solution. Like, who knows what would have happened? It's just a thought experiment to say maybe there's another way here. Now, I can understand why they never even thought of that, right? Because here's the thing. If you go to your refrigerator right now and open it, and all of a sudden you see this huge python snake, like a huge python, what would you do? Well, you probably would freak out and you wouldn't know what to do, because who expects to see a python in their refrigerator? In the same way, I'm sure nobody expected them to just shut down all the schools. Like, that probably came out of nowhere. You didn't think they were going to do that, because again, that would impact white children too. Sure, the states did a lot to sort of help white people, tuition grants and all those kind of things. But I'm sure they didn't see that coming. I'm sure they were probably caught off guard by that. And I get it. But at the end of the day, was this the healthiest outcome for black children? And could we have benefited from building more black institutions, especially if we could have used state funding to do it? So we were advocating and pushing the courts and pushing the states for integration and thinking that's equality. And I'm just asking, what if we had pushed them for an equality of funding or something close to it? Because if you really hate me that much, let's talk about paying me to go away.
I implore you.
Implore away.
Please. Please. You're all going to die down here.